some time now. And some basic studies that have been done, not only within our office, but others, they're looking at 6 billion cubic feet of helium that's available on the Navajo Nation. You could probably argue that, but roughly 6 billion cubic feet of helium. You look at some of these studies, like I said, I've been looking at a lot of these studies as a result of this summit here today. And some studies say there's 20 billion cubic feet. Some say 40 billion cubic feet. We won't know that number for sure until we do more research, more studies, more science on this. And our company right now, and Mark and Andreessen will be talking a little bit about some of the studies we're doing, but that are underway. We're doing soil sampling. I think some of the communities have seen some of our folks out there testing the soil, not so much taking soil, but testing the soil for amounts of helium that might be entrained in that soil there, meaning that there's helium in that particular area. We've been doing aeromagnetic studies that shows the subsurface features. And again, Mark will be talking at length about this. And there's historical data comes all the way back from 1943. So this isn't a new subject, really, with regard to Navajo. It's more of a new subject with regard to the market and the market demand, the world demand for helium. But at the end of the day, though, you start looking at this, and helium, as I mentioned, the demand for helium is great now, and therefore the price is fairly significant. With regard to oil, I think we're at 80 barrels, $80 a barrel, maybe 90, because the oil's back up again. You might have heard the news that OPEC's going to reduce oil supply to the world, so that tends to raise prices. I think oil's $90 a barrel. Natural gas ranges from $2 to $8 an MCF, 1,000 cubic feet. Helium, my goodness, it ranges from $150 an MCF to $250 to $500. It's on its way up, and again, that's demand driving it. So really, the Navajo Nation is looking at a source of multiple billions of dollars when it comes to the helium resource. So, as we're talking about helium here, it does represent a unique opportunity as a new source of revenue to the nation. You've heard some of the comments out of council from time to time and elsewhere, with the result of the recent shutdown of Navajo Generating Station, NGS, and the coal activity that was powering that station for the fuel, that our budget, we've lost, you hear 40 million, you hear 80 million. It's millions, there's tens of millions of dollars, so how do we replace those lost revenues? And again, Four Corners is around the corner. It's going to be closing down as well. So the pending lost revenues is a concern to our leadership, not only at the council level, but at the executive branch, office of the president, vice president. How do we replace these revenues? And we find that helium represents a new source of revenue. This could be the replacement. And of course, helium then allows for diversification from our long-standing coal and oil and gas resources. Now we're moving to helium, but it also represents a near-term, if not immediate, source of revenue. I mentioned the Navajo Z-well over in Tisnas. We could turn that on today and have an immediate source of revenue coming to the nation. So it's available, it's there, and we're looking at it strongly on behalf of the nation as the nation's oil and gas company. So I mentioned some of these studies. So far, I mentioned helium's been taking a lot of helium activity on the nation for some years now. So since 1943, billion cubic feet of helium has been recovered from the nation. I mentioned that there's approximately 6 billion cubic feet remaining, at least, I'll say. And then you got a map up here just kind of showing the general regions of where some of the helium's been found, either found or produced over 75 plus years. You can kind of see it's more of a geological map. You see some of these rock features on the surface, Shiprock, kind of not the best example, but it's a feature, it's a rock feature. Well, those same features are underground, covered up by all the earth and the surface of the earth. Those same features reside underground, and they tend to trap helium as it evolves from deep within the earth. And again, we'll talk about that. But it is kind of showing some of the regions where the helium is known to be. Oops, what did I do? I pushed the wrong button. Duncan. Let's see if I do the other button. Okay, ha. Undo, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this with regards to developing helium. There's a Navajo Nation energy policy. The original one, I believe, was, 1980. We created an energy policy. And in 2013, as you can see here, we revised, we updated that Navajo energy policy. But there is a policy with regard to how the Navajo Nation goes about developing their resources. And it was ratified, signed off by President Shelley in 2013. I guess they could have shown that portion. But here's the header page of that legislation. But in there, the energy policy asserts that the Navajo government should ensure that local impacted communities are educated on relevant energy development and related issues. So the Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company, with regard to helium and all activities, actually, we've been going out to chapters, not only actually for our ongoing activity, but more so with helium-related activity. So we've been meeting with chapters. You saw that map where some of the regions where helium is. We've been meeting with chapters, providing information at our discretion that then leads to the chapter asking for information from their standpoint. And so we've had numerous meetings with a number of chapters for a number of years now, 4 or 5 years, I think we've been talking about it. Well, we recompleted the Z well in 2015, so 7 years ago. So for about 6 years, we're meeting with chapters on providing information. And again, this summit represents kind of a culmination of those efforts. You know, we're here the government should ensure that the local impacted communities are informed of what's going on. So we're providing this summit today in order to be one of those, fulfill this energy policy portion that's required. Again, the policy says, here's how we're going to develop resources on the Navajo Nation. Section 9 says, you got to engage the community. If you go further into the policy, Section 10, as I mentioned, Navajo Nation is an energy tribe, long considered an energy tribe. A lot of tribes in the Four Corners, Southern Ute Mountain, mostly Southern Ute, but Ute Mountain, Northern Ute, Wind River, Hickory to a certain extent, Hickory Apache, all energy tribes. And they were all part of a consortium a number of years ago called the Council of Energy Resource Tribes. And that Council of Energy Resource Tribes convened and coalesced a number of tribes, and eventually 53 tribes that had energy resources within their land base, to how better develop these resources. How can tribes engage themselves in the development of these resources so they go from a passive royalty participant at 1/8 of the slice of the pie to all of the pie? How do we do that? And so in the policy, Navajo Nation starts looking at how do we do this. And again, where it says, first line, energy forms a cornerstone of the Navajo economy. We've always relied on energy resources. And so, as we're mentioning here, it provides jobs, people, electricity in certain cases, homes and businesses, but more so revenues for our local and central government. That's essential that we have revenues to operate our government. That's what allows us to be sovereign. It allows us to be the Navajo Nation and self-governing entity. It's these revenues. So the policy talks about that a little bit there. Goes on to further say that, diverse revenue streams. So they look at, they talk, so section 19, they talk a little bit about the existing coal at the time, existing oil and gas, but how do we move beyond that? Those will still be around, people are still driving cars, still people using coal for electric power, but how do we move beyond that? And so they talk about in section 19, we got to start looking at diverse revenue streams. And so we're looking at helium as one of those diversification methods that can provide, again, additional, not only replacement revenue to the Navajo Nation, but additional revenue, surplus revenues to the Navajo Nation. That is our charge as the company, as the nation's oil and gas company. As we've gone through we've gone through our meetings with tribes, with chapters and community, even with council and leadership, certain concerns have come up. This kind of listed something. In generally speaking, these are the concerns most likely to come up. And there's health and safety impacts of development. We've got the potential hazards to the public and environment. As we move forward, the production of this resource, the well site location and access impacts. Accidents, what are you going to do in case there's an accident? How do we protect the water table? That's the big question. And of course, then the benefits of development, who gets those benefits? You're talking about these dollars, billions of dollars. Who gets those benefits? And so, as those concerns come up and we have additional meetings, ongoing meetings, again, we've had 10 meetings with one chapter. So that we go back at their request and continue to provide information, continue to engage the community, and we answer those questions, So we have proven and tested drilling techniques. The energy industry, oil and gas industry has been around over 100 years, and more so in more recent era of development, we're much more careful and safe about how we do these things. With the environmental concerns that have evolved in society, the oil and gas industry has had to change, be quite frank. And of course, on Navajo Nation, our values instilled in us in our company, we do this anyway, but we're a very regulated industry. So we've got these proven, tested drilling techniques. We try to minimize, or if not mitigate, the emissions. We either capture them or contain the emissions. You can see the list here regarding, if we got a drilling rig on site, how do we keep the community or the surrounding areas safe from that activity? We've got secure access. Our drilling engineer, production engineer, John Wright will talk a little bit about that. We've got training crew. As far as accident contingency, we have to submit a plan for that. If something happens, what's your plan? So all these things are entrained in everything we do by regulation and also by just company standards as an oil company. This is what's best for it. We want our own employees to come to work and go home safe every day. So we have all this instilled in our operations. Of course, there's regulatory requirements to protect the groundwater. And then, of course, all the contamination is cleaned up and tested. Some of the concerns that we've had in the community, our responses to those concerns, is what we're talking about here. And I mentioned we're highly regulated. The United States Bureau of Land Management oversees our activity. The United States Bureau of Indian Affairs oversees our activity. None of this activity can take place unless they looked at it, reviewed our plan, questioned. If there's questions, we change it, they sign off. Everyone has to sign off. EIA has to sign off on it. The US EPA and Navajo EPA, for that matter, has to sign off on it. I mentioned Navajo Nation Minerals Department. Ms. Chair Maya is here today. She'll discuss a little bit about their role in the regulatory oversight of our activity. New Mexico, in this case, New Mexico Oil and Gas Conservation Division. Our grazing official has a say in what this activity that takes place with regard to development. And so we're looking at the benefits as well. On the left side here, we've got we support the nation's government. We talk about the budget, the amount of income that comes in from energy resource development. It's significant. So how do we, where does that go? Well, we want to either balance or have a surplus budget on the nation. It goes towards infrastructure. ARPA notwithstanding, the previous funds would help with these things, with roads and schools and communication, all this, these revenues that come in help us operate. We have medical care, public safety. That is a big issue. How do we get better public safety? These funds, these revenues go towards those activities, among others. To the chapter, we have proposed a percent of our revenue directly to the chapter. It's something we need to work with through council, because not how the agreements within the nation are set up, but how do we provide direct benefit to the chapter that would help them their chapter budget, balance their budget, provide more activities to their community, offer scholarships, take care of the elders. These are all the things that this development can achieve. Our veterans, we had our color guard come in and say, how do we take care of our veterans? It just seems that they're left behind. We can't do that. They served our country. How do we take care of it? Local programs, and then ultimately electricity and water. That is essential to our lifestyle. These revenues could provide those benefits as we look toward it. So, I'll wrap up here. We can move on. So the Navajo Nation, we're just a resource abundant tribe. At the height of coal extraction, all the mines going. At the time that they were going, they said we still have 200 years of coal left. Wow, it's a lot of coal. We've got oil and gas. I mentioned 1.5 billion barrels in the Anna field that produce 450 million. You can't get it all, but you can still get more, right? So there's still that taking place. We've got wind resources, we've got solar, world-class wind and solar, but we also have helium, just an abundant supply of helium. And we're looking at it right now it's an unrealized resource. How do we make it happen so that we have a revenue stream as a result of this? And again, near term, and of course, the diversification of that. So moving into the future, we want to replenish our income stream. Again, allows us to be who we are, the Navajo Nation, a sovereign entity, self-governing, the greatest nation among tribes, right? And then, of course, we want to be able to have support at the local, support our local and council levels, both their support and in return support them with our activity. We are the Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company, created on behalf of the Navajo Nation to serve the people, serve our community. You see that through our gas stations, our C-store. That's what I do now. And I want to have everyone to have a positive customer experience. Well, the same goes throughout all of the business units of our company. How do we best serve the people? Anyway, I will conclude with that. Thank you for your attention, your time. And I'll have James come up and get us started with the next set of presentations. Thank you. Okay.
So I thought maybe before we take a break, if there are any questions for Mr. McKay, he can try to respond. Any questions for him?
You talked about the Z well in Tisaswas. What year was that built?
If I recall from the history of that well, right around 1960.
And how do you ensure that it's safe to use?
So when we went back, so this was a plugged and abandoned well. Texaco came in, was looking for oil, couldn't find oil, and abandoned the well. Tested for gas, as I mentioned, and abandoned the well. And so when we went back in, and they put a big cement plug down there where the production comes in, they put a big cement plug in there, and then so we went and drilled out that cement plug, and so we could retest it. But prior to doing that, we made sure that the pipe that consists of the well construction had integrity. If it had not, we would not have proceeded with testing that well. And this was all under the oversight from, also with a grant from the United States government, BIA, DEMD, has showed that, and as well as oversight from the Minerals Department going through this well. Minerals, the Navajo Nation wanted to see what our resource could be in this particular test well, and we were able to do so. So we made sure the well construction was of integrity so that we could produce safely. And we found through various means of testing, we can test the pipe, we can run tools down there and test the thickness of the pipe, and if there's any pitting or any corrosion, we found out that the pipe was still good. And so we were able then to test that well safely. I think that answers that, I hope.
Over here on the far left.
Yes, sir.
So,
I guess, I have a question,
are you done?
this helium is being, reinvested, is the Navajo Nation reinvesting stop, to increase their revenue, to support the Navajo Nation, community as well? And is the helium going to be piped out of state, like California, Colorado, Texas, for income for the Navajo Nation, or is it just only for the company?
So the helium, I kind of missed the first one, towards the end there, the helium that's going to be produced, it'll be, if it's in a remote location, so some of you are familiar with the production that's on, like I said, helium's been going on, there's Hogback, there's Beautiful Mountain, or not DBK, Red Valley, Hogback, Tosato Dome, and of course the Z-Well, all have helium. Z-Well shut in, but all the other places are producing helium. Those are outside companies, as I mentioned, producing helium. They give us a royalty, they take the remainder. Navajo Nation Oil and Gas, in its effort to develop helium, the 100% of the proceeds will be realized by the Navajo Nation. It will be sold to companies, but all that revenue comes back to the nation, either for the form of royalties or the ownership of the company. We have you'll see one of our speakers today, one of the primary uses of helium is in the medical industry. One of our speakers will talk to you a little bit about that. But with Navajo Nation Oil and Gas directing this development at the behest of the nation, the proceeds all stay within our tribe.
Maybe one more?
Yes, ma'am.
Why not replace the old corroded pipes?
It's not corroded, so we didn't have to replace it. We
Okay,
tested to see if it was, and it wasn't, so.
just the Z-Well though, but
Right.
there's other piping that all throughout that area that goes towards, I guess, Four Corners Monument area, and then you guys will pipe it out from there to Utah, is what I understand.
So you're talking the surface pipeline that transports the helium or gas?
Yeah, all the piping lines that you're planning to use.
There are some in that particular area up in Utah. There's some pipelines. Some of it is corroded and has been taken out of service years ago. So we're not using it, nor the people who own that pipe aren't using it. There is some talk that we're going to reline the pipe and utilize it. But right now, that's just discussion. And part of it is that there's a plant up north in Lisbon that processes gas, natural gas. So you have all these different components in the gas stream, one of them being helium. But you want to separate it out, so ultimately you just get methane, you get propane, you get butane, separate all the pieces, the parts of the gas. There's a plant up in Lisbon that does this very well. How do we get, not only Navajo, but this whole San Juan Basin wants to be able to get their gas processed. So a lot of these companies are talking to the Lisbon plant. How do we get their gas? And so some of those pipelines that I think you're referring to might be put back into service as we move forward.
Okay, one more question.
Yeah.
You talked about NOG's profitability. If NOG is so profitable, why were you asking the Navajo Nation Council for over $5 million for a new C-store?
So we have 3 business units: our upstream exploration production, which is the bulk of our income, $100 oil, right? We get significant revenue from our upstream. The midstream, our pipeline, it's as long as oil's going through the pipeline, we get money from revenues from that. Downstream, if we can drill a well, if we can put out $5 million towards a helium well with huge returns versus $5 million for a store with very little returns, our decision's most likely gonna go towards the highest return on that investment. The nation and the council understands this dynamic, but in this case, Councilman Raymond Smith Jr. would like to see a store in his community and is willing to go forward and ask the nation on his behalf for the money to put a C-store that the Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company would operate. Yeah, and we've got plenty of speakers here, I think that can answer a lot of these questions.
I have a question.
Yeah, so we're gonna,
I have a question.
we've got, one second. We've got many more presentations we're gonna do, so there's gonna be another opportunity to answer questions, but specifically about your question on the C-stores. I think it's important to recognize that we don't have unlimited funds. We're a profitable company, we generate profit, but we have to make decisions about where do we invest. And as Mr. McCabe said, our current opportunity set would dictate that we would invest in the upstream sector because the rate of returns are much better than investing in a C-store. However, the community needs C-stores. So it's that dynamic of, do we take our our bank capital and put it into a convenience store, or does the Navajo Nation invest? Ultimately, we take on debt, no different than an individual that might be buying a home. You take on debt to be able to fund that activity versus putting all your cash into a house. You take out a mortgage. We're doing the same thing with all of our investments. And in our case, convenience stores tend to rank very low when it comes to rate of return. Oil and gas, helium projects, even our pipeline business have better rate of returns. So we have to make ultimately a business decision. Do we go forward and try to invest in a C-store in Lufton? It doesn't usually rise to the top of our list. However, the community is asking for a C-store. So again, Delegate Smith has put forth a proposal. We support if those funds are made available to run the business. Ultimately it's a business decision we have to take. I think with that, I want to move forward because we're over a time commitment here. We got a short break. Let's come back. Let's say 10 minutes. 10:35. We'll come back and get all these presentations. We got 3 more speakers coming that will talk about why helium is important, and we'll start that at 10:35.